Hello, my name is Kirthan, and I coach students that are in high school to get them accepted into the best universities. Through working with high school students, it's very clear to me that they have to do a lot. They have to make sure they're taking the hardest classes at their school while getting the best grades in the hardest classes in their school, while also getting high test scores on their SATs and their ACTs, while also managing that with high level extracurricular experiences, such as getting great internships in research and going beyond that as well, right? Overall, high school students have to do a lot. But the problem is, high school students are not taught how to do a lot or how to manage a lot. For the most part, it seems that they are thrown into a bunch of commitments and it's just a battle of who can sustain themselves the longest. And then the ones that sustain themselves the longest are the ones that get into the best schools. So through working with our students, we try to include some sort of coaching to help them develop themselves personally, make sure they can expand their capacity, their output, and their skills, right? So if you are someone who would like to grow their skills, their productivity, or their capacity, or even become a better focused person, then keep watching. Because what you're about to see is a recording of a presentation I gave to our students. And this presentation alone turned some of these students from very unproductive students to extremely driven and motivated individuals. I hope you enjoy. In the last session, if you were here or if you were not here, Maytha was mentioning that it was hard just managing her workload overall as she's in senior year, right? Including studying for standardized testing, including taking multiple classes. She's also building an AI app she's working super hard on, and she's doing research at Stanford, and she's participating in Carnatic music, and she's starting her essays, right? Which, to be clear, it's not surprising that we're even hearing that in the first place, right? It's hard managing workload as a whole. And as a whole, yes, it's definitely harder to be a quote unquote younger person in 2024 than it has been in like 2004 or something of that sort, right? But the kind of thing I want to get into is being in high school, and because you guys are so young, all of you guys have better health, better energy, better immunity, and better resources than people that are older than you and previous generations, right? Such as you have resources like your teachers, other students, online resources like YouTube, Khan Academy, and stuff like that, right? And you have us, right? With that being said, why are we still struggling to keep up, even though we have all these advantages as being a young person, right? You guys understand, like being a young person, we have all these advantages, but we're still struggling, right? Can you guys nod your heads if you know what I'm talking about? So, and just whether it was a coincidence or not, I came across this one post by somebody I look up to. He's an entrepreneur, and this is what he posted. He tweeted this out. He said, "I get more done at 35 than I did when I was 25, not because I have more energy, but because I have fewer distractions." So I'm before I get into the actual quote unquote content, I'm gonna use this to set the tone of this is what I want to get into, redefining distractions and things like that. And especially as a younger person, here's the thing. While it has never been easier for a young person to be more capable than ever, it has never been easier for a young person to do absolutely nothing. And the reason why it has never been easier for a young person to do absolutely nothing is because they have way more distractions than ever before. You have TalkTick, you have Instagram, you have all this stuff, and you have all these other things that people are spread thin about, right? And my goal in this session is to redefine what a distraction is, remind you of distractions you are not aware of, and make you aware of the distractions you are aware of and are not aware of as a whole. Like, do you get what I'm trying to go in with this session, in with what I'm teaching? Awesome, awesome. So, as a whole, before we get into this, I want to redefine, at least just remind us the definition of what a distraction is, right? And we're going to be focusing on this one. The first thing, a thing that prevents someone from giving full attention to something else, right? A thing that prevents someone from giving full attention to something else. Yes, you have the basics. You have too much time on Netflix. Yes, you have too much time on social media. Yes, you have the basics. But through this, I also want to give some pointers of things you might not remember or might not realize that can also be distractions as well. And before we get into it, to set a little bit more of a tone, I don't have you guys heard of the psychoanalyst in the 1900s called Jung by any chance? Probably not. No. He said something that I think might resonate here. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will rule your life and you will call it fate. For some of you, if I went through institutional genesis with you, this might not be the first time you're hearing this quote from me, but until you make the unconscious conscious, meaning until you make what you don't understand or what you don't realize is present, it could rule your life and you'll call it fate, or it can take away self control from you, right? And a little side note, because everyone here is so young, you have no money. And I'm separating your personal income from what your parents have, right? Because you are so young, you have no money, therefore you have zero resources to leverage except for your time. Nod your heads if you agree with what I'm saying. Like, because you are so young, you have no money for yourself, therefore you have zero resources to leverage except for your time. Therefore, if you are wasting the one valuable resource you have in your youth, you might not be respecting your youth to the fullest. You get where I'm coming from a little bit, and it's a as a whole, I hope this presentation helps you become a titan with your time, and as a result, go farther than everybody else around you. Like, thumbs up if you think this is going to be helpful for you. Appreciate you guys. Appreciate you. So, this is going to be super controversial, but the first thing I'm going to start off with is insecure thoughts and low self-esteem as distractions. I know this is going to be so controversial when I say this, but insecure thoughts and low self-esteem, such as I am incapable of X, I'm not good enough to get into a top university, I am a bad student, I am late, terrible at managing my time, I don't deserve X, are inherently distractions. And I know this is gonna seem super controversial here. Then in 2024, mental health is important and all this stuff, right? I know what I'm saying might get in your head a little bit, but here's the thing. Even if any of these were true, even if any of these were true, how would thinking this way help you? Genuinely, even if any, for example, even if you do label yourself as a bad student, if you do label yourself as a bad student, how would thinking that way help you, or how will accepting that help you? Say if you do label yourself as incapable of getting into your dream school, say if you do label yourself as incapable of achieving your dream, first of all, how do you know that? How do you really know that? You haven't done it yet, so how do you know if you're capable? You haven't gotten into your dream school yet, so how do you know if you're incapable, right? So even if it's true, how is labeling yourself as this helping you? And what do you hope to achieve by giving into this thought, right? So, just to make the people in here aware, if they haven't been aware of it already, humans do get low motivating, sad, sometimes depressing thoughts. Humans do get low motivating, sad, and sometimes depressing thoughts. It does not mean you have to accept it. And what speaks louder than thoughts are actions. Therefore, thinking bad thoughts does not make you a bad person. Imagine I gave an example here. Who raise your hand if you know who Sebum is? Raise your hand if you know who Chris Bumstead is. Some people who are into fitness know who Sebum is, right? And imagine you went up to Sebum and said, "Hey, you motivate me so much. I don't actually lift or train. I think about training all day, but I don't actually lift or train." You're going up to the Mr. Olympia or whatever records he's got. He's basically, if you don't know who Sebum is, he's like the number one bodybuilder in the world, right? And imagine you go up to him and say, "Hey, you just motivate me so much. I think about training all day. I don't actually lift, but I just think about it all day." Do you see how, like, the fallacy in that a little bit? Here's another thing. On another thing I want to say, you might not know him. I haven't heard of him until I was doing research for this presentation. Sam Harris, he's a very popular modern philosopher and neuroscientist. He says courage or bravery is an emotion you can't fake. Doing the courageous or brave thing in spite of not wanting to do it is inherently bravery. Let me repeat that. Courage or bravery is an emotion you can't fake. Doing the courageous or brave thing in spite of not wanting to do it is bravery. But here's the other half. Motivation works the same way. Motivation works the same way. So if you do the required thing and you didn't want to, that is motivation. It doesn't matter whether you felt motivated to do the thing you wanted to do, the outcomes are what matters. Are you guys getting where I'm coming from a little bit? Like, if you do the required thing and you didn't want to, that is motivation. It doesn't matter whether you felt motivated or not, the outcome is what matters. And To bring this home, the thoughts of insecurity or incapability that come into your head are distracting, but it doesn't matter if they're distracting because you still have the choice to do what you want despite those thoughts. That kind of make a little bit sense here. So I'm as a whole, like being a younger person, it might be surprising to even sometimes get thoughts in your head of, oh, I am incapable. And then the first time it comes by your head, it might, they might scream to you more than usual because it's, oh, I never felt this way before. It might be true. And I'm just here to give you that push and tell you it doesn't matter what thoughts come into your head, you can do whatever you want despite that. That make a little sense? Awesome. The second thing that you might not realize is a distraction is your competition. As in the other quote unquote smart students you think about, the other students in general that are applying to your dream program and your dream university is your competition. But here's the thing. I'm saying that they're a distraction, but here's the thing, they're not inherently a distraction. The cost of competition is not the competition itself, but it is the distraction the competition gives you from paying attention to the things you have in direct control. Does that make sense? The cost of your competition is not the competition itself, but it's the distraction your competition gives you from paying attention to the things you have in direct control. Is there anybody that didn't understand that? No, it seems like everyone got it. Cool, cool. So to give a little bit more, actually, before I even go into this, to provide a little bit more of an analogy in a different context. So the biggest mindset shift I had to work Gabe out of when we were building Sharp Education was making him forget about our competition, like other college admissions coaching businesses, for example, right? Yes, there's so many out there. Like you guys in the Bay Area, there's Elite, there's Excel. You guys in like the Dallas area, there's like KD Prep, there's Princeton Review and all this type of stuff, right? But and he sometimes got concerned and scared. Oh, we if we don't have the things those guys have, people will go to them, not us, right? Students will go to them and not us, which technically sounds fair. It's But now we are comparing ourselves to a standard that others set for us rather than what we set for ourselves. You can potentially be lowering the bar just by looking at other people. If you're looking at other people all the time, you're just trying to one up them, right? But if you just focus on you, now you have a potential of 100xing them because you're not comparing yourself. And the cost of competition in of itself, first of all, you have no control over your competitors' actions, only yours. Again, you can be lowering the bar for yourself of what is required. The third thing is you have more data to understand what you need based on your own actions versus what your competition is doing. You see them maybe like once a day or something of the sort, maybe less infrequent than that. And you understand your own inputs on a time basis every single day, every single minute, right? So you have more data to understand what you need to do based on your own actions rather than what your competition is doing, right? And the fourth thing is you're wasting your time looking at other students or looking at other people rather than working on yourself. That kind of make a little bit sense so far? Does anybody have any questions about this so far? Unmute yourself if you do. Feel free to interrupt me. Or is everyone getting it so far? Good. The biggest learning lesson, for example, Gabe and I had to make in business is obsessing over our customers and obsessing over our students, not the competition, and the competition takes care of itself. And in your case, obsess over the work that is required of you, not the work your competition is putting in. And the competition in college admissions takes care of itself. Does that make sense to everyone here? Cool. Does anybody have any questions? Did any of this not go through to anybody? Like, feel free to unmute yourself. We're all good so far? Cool, cool, cool. So the third thing that is a distraction in and of itself is is low presence, being unpresent, and being having bad health, which sounds weird. Now, if you've been here for a while, you've probably heard me talk about the importance of taking care of your health numerous times. You've probably heard me numerous times talk about the importance of taking care of your health, right? and the extension of bad health that it gives. For example, the time spent in class is unfocused, you're drowsy, you're not paying attention. The time spent recovering from bad health habits, for example, not sleeping. If you pulled an all-nighter for a day and then you're trying to recover from that all-nighter by sleeping in the next day, that in and of itself can be a distraction. And the third thing is the loss of alertness or energy when focusing on the work that moves the needle the most, right? So as a whole, the effects of poor health are distracting. You get where I'm coming from so far? Could you super quick in the chat for me? I want you to type something, everybody, in 30 seconds. First thing on your mind, what is one thing about your health that if you fixed would become so much better? Or one habit that if you fixed, everything else would become so much better? Can super quickly put in the chat for me. Like first thing that comes to your head. Okay. And you can DM it to me if you want as well. Okay. Waiting on a couple more people. Most of everybody DM'd me. Vibe of, if possible, can you give the extension of that? If you wait till the last minute of doing your work, how does that affect your health? Can you put that for me if you could? There we go. Okay, so here's what I got. Everybody responded so far, right? Now I got one person said sleep, one, two, three people said sleep, one person said staying hydrated, one person saying if I eat less sugar, and somebody said just like distracting and insecure thoughts, right? So we got half the people said sleep, and the other half's like in order they said staying hydrated, eating less sugar, and just like mindset shift, distracting thoughts, right? So as I expected, majority of them are going to say sleep. As I expected, as the one thing Gen Z suffers is students neglecting their sleep. So the fact that the vast majority of you said sleeping responsibly or something of the sort is not surprising to me. I understand where you guys are coming from, right? And here's the thing, eating less sugar and drinking more water and things like that and mindset shift, those are technically easier to fix because of your environment in Gen Z. You look at people like an alien if they're sleeping at 10 p.m. versus if they're eating less sugar. You get where I'm coming from a little bit? If you heard this person around you just sleeps at 10 p.m., you would look at them like an alien, right? But if you see somebody that's like trying to cut down on sugar, you would probably accept it a little more, right? Just naturally. And that's an environmental thing that Gen Z suffers from, is just neglecting your sleep. Therefore, if you want to set yourself apart from the rest of your generation, go to bed on time and wake up on time. Straight up, straight up. Just go to bed on time and wake up on time. For everybody else who said other things, first of all, I hope you have this down. I know some of you have already have this down. Something else I also want to share is, does anybody here remember institutional genesis? Did I go through it with some people here? Like the expectations, mindsets, and growth stuff? I think I went through it with some people here. I don't think I went through it with Meda, but I think I went through it with Sathvik, Vaibhav, Ashmi a little bit. You guys remember I talk about health in there a little bit, right? And I talk about sleep in there and stuff like that, right? And the people when I talk on the onboarding session, sometimes when I talk about health, the people I always mention sleep, right? I've noticed a correlation just in the small sample set of just like 10 people so far. The people that were naturally, you can tell they had much more sharper, they were sharper, had more mental agility, were people that were also saying, oh yeah, I'm already good with my sleep. It was the same people that you can tell they were sharper, you can tell they had more mental agility. And it was also the same people that said, oh yeah, I always get to sleep like 9, 10, like it's all good. So take that how it is, like reflect on yourself a little bit if you need something of that sort, but just ask yourself if you haven't been prioritizing it. First ask yourself why, what is getting in the way of it, and are those things that are getting in the way of it more important than that, right? Something else I want to share. You've probably never seen this guy before. His name's Daniel Gross, right? Daniel Gross, if you want to look at his resume super quick, he created multiple AI things and he created something called Q. He's the co-founder of something called Q, which is a search engine that got acquired by Apple. And then he ran AI and search projects at Apple, and he's an investor in startups including Instacart, Coinbase, GitHub, Airtable, Figma, Notion. These are all names you probably recognize, right? And he started the AI program at Y Combinator for people that know what Y Combinator is, right? And there's a very famous lecture on YouTube from Daniel Gross. It's called How to Win. And How to Win is just about becoming, for the lack of a better phrase, more capable as a founder. Because building a startup is hard, but you also want to make sure you're capable of being a startup founder, right? Not everybody can do it. And the way he says it, how to win in order: first get your sleep, then get your food, then get your exercise, then get your mind right, and then leadership. Which sounds crazy. Like, why is it more important to get your sleep down than leadership? But the fact that Daniel Gross, someone who has a big impact on the AI world and sold a startup to Apple back in the day, he is saying sleep is important, should at least give you some sort of reflection that, oh, if I want to get better, that this low hanging fruit is that important. Like, can you give me a thumbs up if you agree, like the importance of sleep as a whole? No? Appreciate you guys. Last thing I want to talk about, last-ish thing I want to talk about is time delay. Time delay is inherently distracting, right? And by time delay, so to give you a little bit of context, somebody I look up to, his name's Alex Hormozy. He's actually, Alex Hormozy is, if I show you, is this guy. This guy right here is Alex Hormozy, right? He's about to become a billionaire very soon, right? And he says, this is what he says. He says he used to define power. So he came from a Christian background and he used to define coming out of a Christian background. I'm not saying, I'm not trying to make a religious type of extension here. I'm not somebody to tell you should think this or that for religion, but he used to define power as the distance between thoughts and reality. Therefore, if you think about someone who is omnipotent, such as God, as he thinks, things are, right? So, like somebody who's omnipotent, like God, like as he thinks, things are. So there's zero space between thoughts and reality. That kind of make a little sense so far. And so if we want to be more, for the lack of a better phrase, godlike and powerful in our lives, if we want to be more godly and powerful in our lives, the distance that we can shrink between wanting to get something done and it being done is a direct indication of the personal power we have in our lives. Let me repeat that. So the distance that we can shrink between wanting to get something done and it being done is a direct indication of the personal power we have in our lives. And a huge problem with quote unquote high performers nowadays in 2024 is what not me, but somebody I look up to, a podcaster named Chris Williamson, he calls it the productivity rain dance. As in, many people spend time getting in the mood to work rather than just getting the freaking work done. Lots of people are like, oh, I need to hit my jog before I do it. Not saying that it's bad. Some people are like, okay, I need to meditate before starting my work and things like that. Or even just, I need to take a little break before I get started on the work. I'm mentally in the wrong place. Give me a second. Let me before I actually get started on the work, right? Not saying that some, first of all, you have to assess yourself if this is actually required, but we're not saying to disregard good habits. We're just saying to be careful of your over reliance on them. And something Alex Hormozy, very popular tweet he put out last year. He said, America was built on the backs of men who smoked cigarettes, drove without seatbelts, and had bacon for breakfast. If you miss your biohacking routine this morning, you're going to be okay. And same, this can also go, I understand. So I was talking about the importance of sleep, for example, right? I was talking about the importance of sleep. But if you woke up on the wrong side of the bed and you came out tired or something of the sort, you can still push. You don't, because you got up on the wrong side of your bed, doesn't mean you have to wait to get started on your stuff, right? Do, does that kind of give some insight to some people here? At least are some people thinking I am doing some things I could at least consider getting rid of, right? I also want to talk about one last thing. And this is, I'm not labeling it as five, I'm labeling it as 4.5. So time delay was four, and friends and family is 4.5. And the reason why I'm labeling it as 4.5 is because this is something I'm still unfamiliar with to this day. And I'm going to give you a personal example. If you follow me on Instagram or something of the sort, it's not hard to figure out that I was the homecoming king of my school, right? I was Hoko king in my high school, right? But the reason why I'm mentioning this, I'm not here to actually brag about it. I'm actually using this to tell you that as someone who was the most popular person from his high school, that was actually a bigger regret of mine. The reason why, coming now, I realized, from coming from that place, I realized if time is my most important currency I have as a young person, why am I worrying about impressing everyone? Right? Why am I worrying about impressing everyone? First, it was cool that it's like a cool fun fact. Here there was homecoming kid. Cool, cool. But now, a couple of years later, you're seeing a completely different side of, oh, this person is a titan with his time. He's only going to spend his time with people he deems quote unquote valuable. And I'm again saying I'm still unfamiliar with this. I'm still trying to figure it out. So take this as a grain of salt. But a personal example is like, for example, I love my parents, but when my parents are like nagging, when my family's like nagging and complaining, like I'm not there for it. And if there's other friends and family that are like, if there's other friends that are, for the lack of a better word, how do I say this? First of all, do they support where I'm trying to go? Is the first question. Do they support where I'm trying to go? And if they don't, that's inherently a red flag, right? Then what do they support? Why are you spending your time around them? And I'm not saying you have to be directly invested or like have skin in the game for what I'm trying to do, but at least a bare minimum level of just general support for me trying to become better, right? That's like everybody in here might have their own preferences of who they should spend their time around. But as a whole, the biggest learning lesson here is just to be careful who you spend their time with. And I know, like in high school, in that environment, you're around everybody, people walk around the hallways and stuff like that. But as somebody, like coming from somebody who had all the relationships, quote unquote, I'm going to tell you from personal experience that you don't need to impress everyone. You don't need to quote unquote suck up to everyone. You don't quote unquote need to be friends with everyone. It's actually going to hold you back more than anything. Does that does that make a little bit of sense to some people here? Let's pause here super quick. Let's pause here. Does anybody have any thoughts, questions about what they heard, any feedback? How do you guys hear? How do you guys feel? Ashmi's like, yeah. Someone unmute yourself. Say something. Say that was terrible.
It was pretty informative.
What way?
It just refreshed my mind on the stuff I have to focus on and not get distracted by all the silly things.
I think it was insightful.
That. I love that. And I'm gonna give you the recording and the AI summary to this. So Satya, I know you came a little bit late, so you'll have the recording to the previous part of the presentation. But from what you were in here, the goal of this was just to make you aware of distractions. Did anybody feel like, as they were going through this, does anybody have anything they can share on a personal distraction they were realizing as they were watching this presentation? Adiyatmik, I know you got something in you. I know you have something in you, bro.
I mean, throughout, I guess it did resonate with me. I do think like I do have thoughts like those, things like that. So it was pretty insightful. Like, I could connect to it really well. So
Man.
I think that it helps me because I'm also now realizing all of these like things that are like setting me back, and I am realizing how it is affecting my life.
Love that, man. I love that, man. And one thing I want to share with you guys is I understand the value, and I'm not saying don't have fun, for example, right? I'm not saying don't spend time with your friends or family. I'm not saying any of that. That being said, there are times when you have other priorities, for example, right? You know that you're at this party and you're like, oh, I actually have this stuff to do. I don't want to be here. And it's okay to prioritize the quote unquote work over other things. And something I want you guys to know is there's no perfect way to live out your like high school years, for example, live out your high school and college years. Either you become an overlived high school graduate or an underlived high school graduate. Like like you become an overlived and underworked high school graduate or overworked and underlived high school graduate. I don't know if that comparison makes sense. Does it? And it's I am okay being a beacon of the latter. I am okay being a beacon of somebody that is just like just put your head down and work. Forget about all the other things. Which sounds paradoxical as somebody who was homecoming king of the school. Which sounds paradoxical. I know it does. But I believe strongly that it will help more people in a generation where people are like, oh, your mental health, prioritize whatever, right? Just being a beacon of just get the work done. You guys get where I'm coming from? Because I think just being that person will help way more people than the other.